Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
And now the front pages of the papers dominated by that story of Hillary and the emails, Trump absolutely resurgent. It's a complicated story and also a sensational one. Hillary at war with the FBI as poll lead slumps, says the Sunday Times. The Observer has angry Democrats cry foul at new FBI probe into Clinton, and a slightly happier-looking Hillary there, and a very, very alarmed-looking Hillary Clinton on the front page of the Sunday Telegraph. Clinton hits back at FBI as she fights for survival. Lots of other stories, including lots of Brexit-related stories we'll talk about later on. Finally, of the pops, the Sunday Mirror has the only semi-political story. Michael Gove leaves Sun 11 for 6 hours to go partying. Whether there's anything in that or not, we will discuss later on. But we're going to start off with Hillary Clinton. Ian Rankin, this is possibly the weekend when Donald Trump wins the American presidency.
Well, yes, according to some of the commentators it is. I mean, it's another weekend, another twist. I mean, it's getting very fatiguing, isn't it? It's sort of, you never know where this is going to end up next. You couldn't write it. I mean, this is a problem for satirists and thriller writers, is that you couldn't make this up. But Simon Heffer in the Telegraph makes the point towards the end of his piece that this is a phenomenon to do with people supporting Mr. Trump is an opportunity to smack the smug internationalist political elite in the mouth. And that the idea of a President Trump starts to look possible. And it's a reverberation. It's saying that this is happening in other countries as well, that the Brexit in some ways was a way of smacking the political elite.
It's a revolt against things as they are.
As they are, and the kind of business as usual and the establishment. And we're seeing that in a lot of different countries now. We're seeing the rise of anti-establishment voting.
Well, if anyone's able to get onto Twitter and you click on Michael Moore, the American satirist's kind of rant about why people are voting for Trump and why Trump might win, it's well worth watching, even though we can't show it because it's also very four-lettered. Anyway,
I've watched it.
Moving straight on to another directly related story, you've got Wiener. Wiener? How do we pronounce him, Rachel?
Is it Wiener?
Wiener.
But I mean,
this is the sleazebag American politician who has been dragged into the Hillary email story.
I mean, just when Hillary thought it was safe to measure up the drapes in the White House, this is the worst October spooktacular you could possibly conjure up for her, because the FBI were looking into some texts that Anthony Weiner, who was a mayoral hopeful in New York, who's now resigned for his sexting activities, they were looking into that, and they discovered another cache of Hillary Clinton emails, and which then they decided were worthy of some investigation, which they announced last week.
I was watching Trump last night responding to this, and he is smoking. He thinks he's won it now, and this is absolutely devastating. What we don't know, of course, is whether there's anything in these emails or not, though Simon Heffer in that same piece, Ian, points out that probably if you're the head of the FBI, you don't do something as incendiary as this, unless there's good reason for it.
Heffer says he thinks that maybe the senior members of the FBI were saying, you've got to go with this. We can't let this lie. And that's why, I mean, why else would he do it 2 weeks in from the election, unless it's a very overtly political act? Because if Hillary wins, his head's on the plate.
Yeah, if something comes out afterwards then, which is really serious, he's going to look really stupid as head of FBI.
We're all fascinated by this. None of us have a vote. So let's move back to British politics. And the big story of the week was Nissan. I thought a really, really good spread in the business section of the Observer there, Kate Hoey, about the British car industry generally, who's doing well, what they want and so on.
Yes, this is Nissan throws the UK a Brexit lifeline, but GM may hit the road. And it is a very good review, really, of the whole car industry and how it was so down and now how it's coming up. And of course, the Nissan decision, having expressed some concerns, to now say that they're going to stay and they're very confident about staying, was a great boost to all of us who are pleased that we are voting, that we voted to leave. The issue now, of course, is that there are some people who feel that some way the government must have bribed them or something. And I think you'll obviously be going into this later, but I do think, and I linked it with a story in the Sunday Express about how some people are now saying that how could Labour, a party of workers, be so negative about what is a good news story, and particularly to the people of Sunderland, where, of course, there was a huge vote to leave.
I don't think there could have been a financial kickback deal. I mean,
No.
Mr. Ghosh, who runs Nissan, said we need to have a deal beforehand. But actually giving them money to compensate against tariffs would be against Article 3 of the World Trade Organization rules, which I know,
And EU rules.
which Dominic Lawson has pointed out.
Well,
in the Sunday
I mean,
Times.
I think that, it is, there, let's be honest, there are a lot of people still who want to rock the boat on Brexit and are giving every opportunity. And I think
The
something
sofa
like
is
this,
rocking,
Nissan has, I think, done a great service, because now I think we will see a lot more companies actually coming out and saying we have confidence that we are going to get the best deal possible.
It's also just a good piece of informative journalism. I didn't realise, for instance, that Dyson, who makes the cleaners and so forth, is now trying to manufacture an urban car, some kind of automated urban car.
The technology.
There's lots of car making going on in Britain I knew nothing about.
Yes, and the head of Rolls-Royce said when people talk about an industrial revolution, there really is one. There is breathtaking technology coming.
Well, I'm very pleased to hear it.
Now, of course, Brexit has changed the politics of the UK, but particularly the politics of Scotland, Ian. There's a story on the Sunday Herald there, I think, front page of the Sunday Herald. You've got an iPad.
Yep.
Because we're like that these days.
Yeah, I had to borrow it because I'm not like that these days. But yeah, it's the Herald, and it's I mean, I think if you live south of the border and you do the mainstream media, you might have the idea that the Scottish independence has gone away. It's been shoved under the carpet for another generation, but it really hasn't. If you live north of the border, it's a continuing issue, and independent Scotland could remain in the EU after Brexit, leading expert says. Now, of course, we don't believe in experts anymore, do we? We're told that.
We do believe in this one.
But this is John Curtis, and John
Curtis
Curtis
called the election right.
A leading cephalogist, and he says what could happen is that after independence, if Scotland went for independence, Scotland could just slip into the UK role as a member state in the EU. Now, whether that would work or not, I mean, it's a lovely thing to put on a manifesto if you're going for independence, to say, well, actually, we could just
carry on.
This would all be kind of quite painless. But, we come back to the same thing. I mean, we look at what's happened with Canada, with trying to get a trade deal with Canada. Look at how somewhere like Wallonia can screw it up for years and years and years, or say, hang on a minute, at the last minute, this isn't going to happen. And you've got people like Spain. Would Spain be happy about this? Would Spain, looking at Catalonia and looking at Catalans wanting independence, go, OK, Scotland, you can just come in. Because then the Catalans would go, wait a minute, it's really easy once you become an independent country to get into the EU. Let's do it.
Let's just have a short pause to give our commiserations to Mr. Rebus, who was retired. He was trying to give up the cigarettes. It was all being quiet, and you've dragged him back from retirement one last time. Or maybe not one last time. Maybe there's going to be more Rebus novels.
Who knows?
But you always said you had, because you're a Scottish writer, you had to take a position, or everyone wanted you to take a position on independence. So you had Rebus, this kind of chain-smoking old soak from the 1970s, who was pro-union and was going to vote no, and you had his sidekick Siobhan, who was younger and trendier, who was voting with the SNP for Scottish independence. Is that, by and large, still their positions?
I think that would be their positions, yes. I mean, Rebus is a conservative at heart with a small c, and he doesn't like change, he fears change. Siobhan Clarke is younger, more idealistic. She says, OK, let's go for it, what the heck? I mean, let's see what happens.
And what about Ian Rankin?
And Ian Rankin is right in the middle. This is my Jekyll and Hyde, and I'm right in the middle there, not taking any. I did, on Twitter, I did say, look, I don't want to get into politics ever, but on Brexit, I would just like to say this will remain, that I will not get into politics, will remain as my position.
Very good. Now, another very interesting piece by a name we don't often hear in the newspapers, Mr. Eliash.
He's head of Head, which is
head
of Head, which is a sports manufacturing company.
But he's quite a big shot in the kind of world of business and so forth, and indeed conservative orientated politics as well. And he's written a really interesting piece in the Sunday Times where he sort of decodes what actually Theresa May's real position on Brexit is.
Yes, and he also claims to have met Angela Merkel, so it's actually quite an important little story.
And Angela Merkel says if everyone's sensible, we'll get a sensible solution. Yeah. Interesting.
And it sort of backs up actually what Kate Hoey was saying, though it slightly pains me to say it, because he's saying that they're going to get a sensible deal whereby the British government should get it, and this is what the EU should do, and there should be give and take on both sides, with skilled workers, regulatory equivalents for financial services, i.e. passporting, you get what we get, and a sort of free trade, a tariff union, what do you call it, a customs union.
Customs union, yeah.
So the idea that, as you were saying, that Rolls-Royce can carry on manufacturing, our car industry can carry on manufacturing, using Europe as one large factory floor, makes sense, and I really hope that that actually is what eventuates.
This is really, really interesting, because if we went that way, so we're in a customs union, we don't have tariffs, and the pound is lower, that is very good for old-fashioned British manufacturing, or modern British manufacturing and engineering, which has always been the poor relation in our lifetimes. It's tougher for aspects of the financial services industry. So this could be the rebalancing of the British economy we've been talking about for 30 years.
And it also gets that really big demand, which was there, whatever people say, that no freedom of movement, but not wanting to stop immigration and people who we need in this country. So the high skills thing would be something that actually could still happen. And as long as we're not in the EEA, then we don't have to go along with freedom of movement.
Let's hope that extends to students as well. We need students to come in from other countries to this country.
Yes, and I think students would be still allowed to come in, but they need to be clear that they're going back again.
But what about what about importing inflation, which was my next story, which is, you know, Thai food tea is going to be twice as expensive, and you know, the Mac, the Apple Mac, your Apple Mac is going to be £400.
There was a young London-based techie who made a very good tweet yesterday pointing out that it's now cheaper to fly to Canada, buy your MacBook Pro in Canada and fly home again than to walk down the street and buy it in your local Apple store.
So what about all these manufacturers importing
the Apple
inflation?
Macs have always been cheaper in America or Canada too.
Not much.
Can we just move on to one final Brexit-related story, which is the return of Tony Blair, riding high to revive the Remain forces.
I know we've mentioned Simon Heffer before, but again, this lovely picture of Tony Blair with a Chinese actress during his book launch, and it's saying, Tony Blair brilliantly shoots the Remain cause in the foot with his ill-timed intervention. And I do have to say that, you know, Tony Blair's gone away from being Prime Minister, he went off around the world, made himself millions and millions of money. Now he's obviously feels he's made enough money, and he now wants to come back and intervene in British politics. And of course he's got a right to say, but I was pleased he said this, because I think that will just absolutely nail the case of the Remainers, that they've got someone like him coming back to support.
One more story we must do is poor old Michael Gove in trouble for leaving his 11-year-old in a hotel. I can't work out, Ian Rankin, if this is a story or not a story. What do you think?
It's not much of a story, is it? I mean, an 11-year-old left in a luxury B&B for some hours, who's found apparently wandering the corridor by a night porter who then gets a little bit worried about him. If it had been my 11-year-old, A, he wouldn't have left the room because he'd have been on his computer or watching DVDs, and B, he would have had a mobile phone and would have phoned his parents up and said, what time are you coming home? So I don't know. But you know, Gove was out there dancing, apparently dancing very badly.
Well, here's somebody who knows, because Rachel Johnson was there at the time.
Oh, goodness, I should never admit to this, but I was with Michael and Sarah until 1:30 that morning. And can I just say in their defence, the only reason their son was babysitting their 2 dogs.
So it's the dogs we should be talking about.
Exactly, so they left the dogs as well. I think it's absolutely
is this a
fine.
Johnson Gove rapprochement starting in the Badlands of Cheltenham?
No, we were both invited to the Sunday Times Cheltenham Literary Festival, where we did a very jolly event together. But he was on the dance floor, so I decided to ask the DJ to put on Blurred Lines, which of course got the whole place. So there were some blurred lines when it comes to the Johnson Gove rapprochement there.
And in terms of the Ed Balls, Michael Gove dancing technique, just enlighten us a little bit.
I honestly have to tell you, I think Michael is a shoo-in for Strictly next year.
Ah, you heard it here first. Listen, thanks all very much.
And what a week of frights and spells it's been. He got a boost. Yikes. Yes, that's a Trumpkin when the FBI reopened its investigation of Hillary Clinton's emails. She got a lift when Nissan agreed to build new cars here because of fairy dust, or could that be Wonga that she sprinkled to protect it from Brexit tariffs? And he tried to put a curse on Heathrow's third runway to keep it grounded after the government announced liftoff for the controversial scheme. Heathrow also caused him to cross to the dark side, or is it back to the light? You decide, by quitting the Tory party and prompting a by-election. Now, talking of double toil and trouble, it's Screeny and Allegra.
Thank you, Robert. Now, the only game in town today isn't Robert's unsettling moustache. That'll probably be tomorrow's papers. The biggest story is the FBI's decision to look at Hillary Clinton's emails again. Most papers are going on it. The Sunday Times draws attention to this poll lead slump that Hillary Clinton supposedly had. There is one poll showing it's narrowing, perhaps because of it. But we just wanted to show you and put it in context what's been happening over the the last just over a year. And you can see, even taking in this latest poll, Clinton still 7 points ahead. But nonetheless, Democrats do sound pretty rattled. Now, back this side of the pond, we have done for you the first ever Peston on Sunday poll. We've done it with opinion, and we're tracking 2,000 adults who's handling key issues best. Just look at these. So the first ones we're looking at this week are strengthening the economy, improving education, protecting the NHS. So here, a whopping skyscraper of a lead. It won't surprise you. Theresa May out in front on the economy by quite a way. But then here on improving education, she's still ahead by a lot, just not as far. And then this, protecting the NHS. Now, here, it is a lead. It's comforting for Jeremy Corbyn, except consider that Labour's normally in the lead. That said, it shows you, for the Tories, it's still a bit of a weak spot for Theresa May. Now, this lot have also been providing inspiration for Halloween costumes, and here at Peston on Sunday, we've gone through and found the best for you. So this first one is a lady dressed up as the Prime Minister. She's saying she's scarier than any vampire. This here is Article 50. And then remember when Jeremy Corbyn said he couldn't find a seat on a Virgin train and was actually fibbing? This couple very creatively thought that they would do this. Of course, this bloke would have to sit down for the whole party, but there we are. Anyway, your costume, Robert, was your moustache, wasn't it?
Yeah, and people are voting on whether it stays or not. You know that Theresa May look-alike, as it were. Was it me, or did it look a bit like Nicola Sturgeon dressing up? I'm not sure, really. Anyway, I'm delighted to be joined by Nadine Dorries can I just ask both of you if we could look at America for a second? Mm-hmm. It does look as though Trump is massively back in the race. Liz Kendall, what do you think? Is this a turning point in the American election?
Well, obviously, the Democrats and Hillary wouldn't want the focus to be now on all these emails and the new FBI investigation. She needs to get it back onto the risks posed by Trump and the change that she would represent for ordinary working people in America. I think they'll be busting a gut to get the focus back on those issues and away from this new FBI investigation. This is the most important vote I think I've seen in my generation, and it is absolutely essential that Hillary and her team turn it back onto the real issues, because I don't think that this FBI investigation is likely to find anything new from the last one, and that's what she's got to do now.
Nadine, you, despite being a Tory, I think would prefer Hillary, is that right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's utterly bizarre what's happened. The FBI, 10 days before the election, just bizarre. But, you know, there are... what I think Hillary should do now is a bit like you said, Hillary, Liz, focus on the issues. She knows about education. She knows about foreign policy, which is very important in the States at the moment. She knows about health. I think she should really focus on those issues in the 10 days leading up to the election now. Trump knows nothing about any of those, apart from everything else. And I think she should start now to demonstrate her expertise on the matters, on the issues that matter leading into the election.
And actually matter to people's lives.
Yeah, and to Americans.
Although I have to say, having watched both of them last night, he is looking much more confident, much more relaxed.
Let's start the programme by taking a look through the Sunday papers. I'm joined by David Lammy, the MP for Tottenham, by Miranda Green, the journalist and former press secretary, to Paddy Ashton during his time as Lib Dem leader, and by the businessman and co-chairman of Leave Means Leave, Richard Tice. Very good morning to you all. David, we'll let you kick us off with the story of the year and next year and the year after. Brexit, go on then.
Surprise, surprise.
Yeah.
There is a story in the Mail on Sunday, page 14, and it is basically that the price of tea is going up. Thai Food Tea have been very clear that because of the cost of imports, which have gone up by 50%, it is very likely that they'll have to put the price of tea up. This follows off the back of Marmite. I know Morrison's have had problems this week. And it's just really a story about inflation and the reality of inflation for a lot of families across the country. And I'm thinking very much of my own constituents who've not got a lot of money on the whole, and actually for whom this is very, very
All right,
serious.
so it's coming down the line. I mean, I could say, couldn't I, Richard, you see it as a storm in a teacup?
Well, you could indeed. And to a degree it is. People forget that actually, in the last year, food price inflation fell, and through technology, you know, the retailers, it's incredibly competitive. And you have got some unscrupulous businesses who are using this as an excuse, even for UK-produced goods, to increase their prices.
But
I think they will be found out.
But it's basic economics. If you're importing something and you're paying in a devalued pound, it's going to cost more.
Yes, but let's remember, it cost less last year. There might be some goods that go up, but it is such a competitive world out there. Other supermarkets will, they'll actually absorb the price increases to gain market share.
But it can only go so far, can't it? I mean, if the pound keeps going. It keeps going down, then the price has got to feed through.
Who knows where the pound will go? But this is just one of many factors that is what's based on how businesses price their goods and things.
I mean, Miranda, you see it as I'm using a lot of cliches here. Straw in the wind. Then there's much more to come. I mean, we've seen it with petrol prices as well, starting to move up.
We have. So I think there's two serious things about this particular storm in a teacup. One is that inflation is a real thing that people experience in their lives, and so if that starts to happen, the kind of feeling of the population being economically pessimistic might rise, and that will be a problem for the hard levers, as it were. Richard, I'm looking at you.
Do you kind of
the
hope
hard
that,
levers.
though? I mean,
I wouldn't hope that. No, I wouldn't hope that at all. But the other thing that is real also is this idea of the cost of living being something that plays into politics more generally. And actually, if you look back over the coalition years, they had a couple of really rocky years in the middle there that were partly caused by people experiencing a change to their own family budgets, and what was then Labour.
Well, I mean, it took almost all the coalition years for real pay to get back to where it was.
That's right, absolutely. And Labour tried to capitalise on the cost of living crisis. If we get one of those, then the population at large start asking questions.
I'm going to move on because there's other stories related to this. But David, I mean, and you touched on it in your analysis then, perhaps not in your constituency because it was in London, but a lot of the people who actually voted for Brexit are going to be the ones that, I mean, in some analyses because of this, are going to be the ones that suffer most economically.
Absolutely, and that's the sort of irony that, actually costs are high, rents are high across the country if you're renting, and because we're not building council housing anymore. Wage inflation has been an issue.
Wage inflation will go up.
But Richard,
that's the
I'm
key
not sure
point.
you do the weekly shop, but if you do the weekly shop, things like Marmite, things like tea, these things matter. It's real.
I get
and
that.
It's not theory in Westminster.
But also what's real is that wage inflation will creep up, and that's the other side of the cost coin. And I think
not great for business, though, is it?
Well, at the end of the day, you've got to spread the rewards. And I think, people who voted to leave, they said, we've had too much wage suppression. We actually want some wage inflation.
OK.
And that's what
as long as those businesses are making profits, which leads me neatly in my own seg there into this Nissan. And do we know do we know what guarantees, if any, the government has actually given Nissan to invest in its Sunderland plant?
We don't know that, and there's pressure to kind of get a bit more detail on what reassurances they gave in order to pledge that they would stay in Sunderland, make the new models there, which of course we should all be celebrating that they did make that decision, hooray. But this is a very interesting story in the Sunday Times business section, their lead story, because of course what's going to happen now is that every other important sector of business and industry is going to be trying to get the same sort of meeting inside Number 10 to get their own sort of reassurances. So we've got a story here about the drugs giants, the pharmaceutical industry, which is really important to the UK economy, asking for £1 billion from the Treasury to fill the funding gap because pharmaceutical research has been very heavily subsidised by EU funding. So I think this is interesting on two levels. One, because it matters what happens to the pharmaceutical industry. There's a lot of jobs in that industry in the UK, but also because this idea that every industry and every large company is going to be putting massive lobbying effects. I mean, this is
there's the rest of the car industry
boost for the
well,
lobbying industry, apart from anything else.
Jaguar Land Rover saying, what about us just within that sector?
Exactly.
So Richard, I mean, there's one way round all this. It's quite simple, isn't it? It's staying in the single market.
Well, people voted to leave, and that's leave the European Union and all its component parts.
But do you think they voted to leave the single market?
Yes, I think they voted to leave the European Union and everything that goes with it. And, the single market, there is this myth out there that actually it's been a really good thing for the UK. It hasn't. It costs us a net 10 billion a year, and yet we lose about 100 billion in trade.
That's nothing if you're going to be giving £1 billion here, £1 billion there, and you add it all up.
But that's money we've already given to the EU, and they've given us back. So net, it's the same. Sure, you're going to get different industry lobby groups lobbying government. Government's smart, they know what's going on. I think it's inconceivable that the government could have offered Nissan a sweetheart deal that they didn't think would get out into the public domain. I suspect they'd be much more general. They've given warm, positive, reassuring words, which is actually what business wants.
Do you really think warm, reassuring words? These are hard-hearted businessmen from on a multinational company, and all they wanted to hear was, "You'll be fine." That's more or less what they said.
Let's remember that most of the Sunderland voted to leave. Those workers know that it's the most productive car plant in the UK. They know it's probably one of the top 2 car plants that Nissan has across the world. So, they are reassured. They know how good they are.
Just takes a bit of stroking. That's all.
What we also know is just a few weeks ago, at Theresa May's first G8, the Japanese were warning very, very seriously about the consequences of Brexit. Nissan know what it means. There's a sweetener behind this, I'm sure. The details will unravel and other companies will be queuing up.
All right, I'm going to cut that off there because we've got a lot more important stories, including, I suppose this is a dimension of it, but Richard, you actually haven't brought us a story yet. This is about Mark Carney, the Governor of the Bank of England, and it seems like he's been under fire from the government more or less since the Brexit vote. Personally, first of all, do you think he should go? Do you think he veered too far towards the Remain side?
It's a decision for him, but it's clear that he is potentially one of the losers in terms of the winners and losers from the Brexit debate. I do think he went too far in the debate. I don't think his track record, frankly, is that good. Twice in previous years, he said that interest rates would have to go up. Actually, they didn't. They stayed the same or had to come down. And I think he overstepped the line. So, whether or not he decides that is a matter for him.
Very important things. OK, we've seen the effect on the pound, but so far the stock market has been stable. It's gone up because of the boost to exporters in the main through a devalued currency. If international markets see a government forcing out, or seem to be forcing out, an seemingly independent governor of a major central bank, they're going to get spooked.
I don't think so. It's his personal decision. He can decide whether he wants it. Well, it is. And, but at the end of the day, I do think he overplayed his hand. And there are plenty of other people who could do as good or indeed a better job than Mark Carney.
That's what worries.
Like Jacob Rees-Mogg.
Yes, that's what I was going to say. That's what worries me. The only other name in the frame seems to be a deeply eccentric member of the Conservative backbenches.
We're a globally facing nation, and once again, we can look around the world for the best central bank governors for our great nation.
Well, I hope we'll be open to foreign
as long as they can get a visa.
Yes, quite.
I suppose it's important skills. Listen, let's have a look at the American elections. What an October surprise that was a couple of days ago. Miranda, you bring it to us on the effect on the Hillary Clinton campaign.
Absolutely. So, as polling day nears in the US, it looked as if Hillary Clinton was sort of pulling clear of Donald Trump. And then this extraordinary story arose just in time to kind of upset the apple cart all over again. And essentially the FBI put out a very mysterious sounding letter saying they were reopening an investigation into the emails that had passed between her team and others in their sort of entourage. And originally, of course, Hillary Clinton had been criticised heavily for using a private email account to use to talk about sensitive issues, and there are allegations that she was not respecting security as she should be. The problem with this story is that actually it seems that the FBI has decided to investigate some emails that might not even be from her. And they actually are the ex-husband or soon-to-be ex-husband of one of her aides, who is being investigated for some very unpleasant sort of sexual texts to an underage girl. It's all really gruesome. But the way it's been released makes it look as if Hillary is in the frame for something improper, and so they are saying the FBI has
do you read it that way?
Unrightly influencing the election.
But Richard, I know you're reflecting on the story, which is why I'm bringing you in on the Observer here. Do you feel the FBI were damned if they did, damned if they didn't? If they have this information, they've got to investigate it. If they waited till after the election, then Hillary Clinton won. It's an if. The Republicans will say, why did you withhold this investigation? You've got to follow the evidence.
They probably are, to be honest. But, I think this story has probably been there for some time. It's come out, surprise, surprise, a couple of weeks before the election, in the same way that, the recording of Trump's comments. All of this stuff, the media have. I think the other sort of thing behind this, which is really important, and why I think the vote could be much closer than polls are currently indicating, is that about 18 million more Americans have registered to vote for this election than 4 years ago. And if those voters...
Brexit similarities?
Well, there could be Brexit similarities. If those people are those who feel that they've been left behind by the establishment in the States, then anything could happen. So I think, you know, one shouldn't be surprised if actually the votes turn out somewhat different to what the polls are saying.
David, bring us this story you've got on the housing crisis in the Telegraph, I believe.
Well, this is a fantastic story for once on housing, which is that finally the government have realised that we should be building a new generation of housing that can be put up quickly. It was called prefabs in the past, and they've splashed on prefabs to solve housing crisis, but actually I've seen this at work. It's now called modular housing that can be put up very quickly. You see it across Europe. We need rapid solutions and we need to get on with it. I think we should have much more self-build. I have to say, I think we should bring back council housing. No councils are building council housing anymore. It's not, you know, because people right to buy, you can get on with it. It's the biggest, and that's something, Richard, you should be concerned about. The subsidy from taxpayers to go and buy your council house has robbed us of houses in which people
just
can
stay with
live.
the story,
This,
David. I mean,
this is great.
I mean, you know, prefabs don't exactly have a great name. The very few that are still around. These are much better, are they? These are modular. I mean, there's a kind of Nordic model,
the
isn't there? You buy them in
science has
IKEA.
moved on hugely.
And to be honest, I built one about
really?
11 or 12
Tell us
years
about
ago.
it.
So, which was by a business in Peterborough. The real issue is that it's not only speed, but it's also quality. The quality is so much better because they are built in dry factory conditions.
That's right.
And then they're taken to site and delivered, and they literally appear on site. I mean, it's like, you know, oven ready. Ready to go in 3 weeks.
Still about the site.
It is
still
a huge
about having
opportunity,
the site, isn't it?
Well,
you know,
it's
about a lot of
I was about to say,
is
it's about the land.
important.
That's
Yeah,
the
the
key
land
point.
is
But also, you can go up with this modular housing. So there is, it's a huge opportunity.
We're out of time. Thank you all very much indeed. Very good seeing you. David, Miranda, Richard, thank you very much indeed.